Today is May the 4th. Does anybody know? And by the way, you're doing a nice job of keeping yourselves muted, but raise your hand if you know the significance of May the 4th. All right. Now, I've watched all the Star Wars movies, every single one of them. As a matter of fact, I was a very young man, a boy in high school when the first one came out. So I've watched them all when they hit the theaters. But I didn't realize, I was probably one of the last ones to realize that May the 4th is May the 4th be with you. I think this is the special Star Wars day. So, of course, we've had some pretty big guests on this program. We've had an astronaut that lived on the space station for 6 months. We had Ruby Bridges on. We had actor Sean Astin, who played in Goonies, and he was in Lord of the Rings as Sam Gamgee, and he played Rudy. We had a baseball manager. We've had a U.S. senator, but none can compare to our guest today because he comes from a completely different galaxy. He comes from a galaxy far, far away. His name, if I'm pronouncing it right, is Jula Bool. And he's going to share a few stories with us about where he comes from. I'm going to interview him. And then afterwards, you will be able to ask him some questions. But I believe that Jula Bool is a Jedi Knight. And this ought to be a fun occasion. So, Jula Bool, I don't know if Zoom works from your galaxy far, far away, but we're going to try it out since he's not from, this galaxy. But I think with technology, it's going to work okay. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Jula Bool. And I don't know if I call you Jula or Jedi Knight Bool. What would be the proper way for me to introduce you if this is working, Jula Bool? How do I refer to you? What is your name that you go by?
So you can call me Jula Ball, and some people will shorten it to Jubal.
Okay, I will call you Jula Ball. Well, Jula Ball, thank you so much for coming onto our program this morning. It's going to be a fantastic day, and hopefully when you're speaking, you'll become large on the screen. And this is Pickerel. I can see you, so maybe you can nod if it works when he's speaking, if he's large on the screen. But thank you so much, Jula Ball. We're so pleased that you're able to break away from all of your busy dealings as a Jedi Knight to join us on the program this morning on this day, May the 4th. But thank you so much for being with us today. Are you okay if we go in that format that I introduced, where I could maybe ask you a few questions and then you could read us some stories and the kids could ask you some questions at the end?
Yes, I'd be totally fine with that.
Wonderful. Well, my first question is, we live in this universe and we're fairly familiar with it. What is the current state of your universe, Jula Ball?
All right. So I am a Jedi Knight and a member of the Galactic Republic, and we are currently embattled in a Clone War. And it is named such because there are a group of planets that have seceded from the Republic, and they have decided to go against the Galactic Senate, and they have created entire droid armies with which to besiege planets. As a response to this problem, the Republic has created clone troopers, which my fellow knights and I lead, to combat them and free planets from their reign. We're currently in the third year of the Clone Wars, and we're hoping to end it soon.
Oh, well, my hope is that it would end soon for you too, Jula Ball. So we understand that you are a Jedi Knight, and it really is a privilege to have a Jedi Knight on our program and into Zaharis today. So once again, I want to thank you. But could you maybe tell us if there are different ranks in the Jedi Order? That's a question that I've often wondered through the years. As a matter of fact, I've lost sleep over it at night. But are there different ranks in the Jedi Order?
There are. All Jedi start out as what are called younglings. They're Force-sensitive children that were sought out by other Jedi Knights to be raised and trained as Jedi. during your youngling training, you'll typically receive a lightsaber crystal and build a lightsaber. Once that's been accomplished, a Jedi Knight or a Jedi Master will then select you as their Jedi Padawan or apprentice. During that time, you'll be training one-on-one with a particular master. And during that time, you can then take your trials, which would precede you to knighthood, Jedi Knight status. From there, you can further specialize into Jedi Guardian, Jedi Sentinel, or Jedi Counselor, and then finally moving on to the Jedi Master rank.
You know, Jedi Knight Julabal, that leads to yet another question, and it's another wondering that I've had through the years. I'm sure our listening audience members have too, but what is the difference between Jedi Guardians, Jedi Sentinels, and Jedi Counselors?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So, Jedi Guardians are typically trained in lightsaber combat. They have a fluency for it. As such, they will typically wield a blue lightsaber crystal and use a single lightsaber. Jedi Sentinels are trained in defense and protection of the Senate, and so they'll typically have a dual-wield lightsaber or a saber staff with a yellow lightsaber crystal. And Jedi Counselors are more trained in the Force and the living Force, and so they don't tend to do much combat, but they still wield a lightsaber, and theirs is typically green.
What connection do kyber crystals have with a Jedi Julabal?
So as I explained earlier, Jedi younglings get taken to the planet of Ilum, where they will form a connection with a crystal during their youngling trial, and that crystal will then serve to be their personal lightsaber crystal moving forward. The crystal's affinity or color tends to give some insight as to what your specialization as a Jedi might become. It's not always the case. For instance, my former master wielded a green lightsaber even though he was a Jedi Guardian.
What color is your kyber crystal, out of curiosity?
So I feel like our connection is pretty strange here. Let me see if I can't do something about that. One moment.
Keep in mind, boys and girls, this is transmitting through an entirely different galaxy.
See if I can clean it up a little bit.
It's quite impressive that we could even conduct this today, since we're in galaxies that are so far apart from each other.
So I don't know if you can see it or not. This is my personal lightsaber. And I was actually attuned with a violet kyber crystal. Are you able to see that?
Yes. So be careful with that thing. You could poke an eye out.
There's lots of treatment for that one.
Hey, Julabal, I have a question for you. Luke Skywalker, his Jedi Master was Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So all Jedi Knights have a Master. Is that correct?
Correct. Not everyone that has a Master is actually the Master rank. As I explained earlier, a Jedi Knight or a Jedi Master, somewhere in that line, can then train a Padawan.
Who was your Jedi Master?
So my Jedi Master is named Joklin Danva. He's a Jedi Knight who is on his way to becoming a Jedi Guardian, but he became one with the Force during the first battle of Geonosis.
You know, that leads me to another question. You know, anybody connected with the Star Wars universe knows that there are different lightsaber philosophies. You know, I have mine. Mrs. Kitchell has hers. What is your lightsaber philosophy, Julabal?
So my master, Joklin Danva, was trained in Teras Kasai, which is a form of martial arts in hand-to-hand combat. And during his Jedi Guardianship training, he was working on a lot more lightsaber combat. I was particularly following his path, and so I'm currently on my way to becoming a Jedi Guardian as well.
Okay, the ways of Terras. How do you say that?
Terra Kasai.
Terra Kasai. What are the ways of Terra Kasai?
So, like I explained, Terra Kasai is a form of hand-to-hand combat. It's not too dissimilar from various forms of martial arts on your Earth.
Okay, you mentioned the first battle of Geonosis. Were there other battles, Julabal?
Yeah, there was one more battle of Geonosis. The Separatist clan had actually reclaimed control of the planet after the initial battle. And so a couple of prominent Jedi Masters went and besieged the planet and actually freed it from the Separatist alliance and managed to shut down the droid factories that were continuing to produce.
When they're not acting as soldiers, Julabal, and generals in the Clone Wars, what do the Jedi's do when they're not engaged in their conflict?
So that's an interesting question. So Jedi's traditionally, for thousands of years, have held the role of peacekeepers. We'd also be diplomats and negotiators, and oftentimes we have to defend, small settlements in the Outer Rim against pirate raids and various other creatures.
Everybody in this Zoom session, with the exception of yourself, Julabal, is limited to this world that we live in. But you, as a Jedi Knight, have been able to visit other worlds. While you've been visiting these other worlds, what interesting things might you have come across?
That's interesting. So I did happen to bring along with me a couple of artifacts. Hold on. So I have these items, which are called holocrons. In my right hand, the blue one is called a Jedi holocron. And my left hand, this, I believe, is a Sith holocron. Jedi holocrons are used to store information, much like your computer systems on Earth, and we use it to pass down knowledge of the Force to future generations of Jedi. I assume that the Sith do as well. However, I've yet to be unable to lock the secrets of this particular device.
Thank you, Julabal. How fascinating. I've never seen anything like that before. In all the different worlds that you visit, I imagine that there's probably books that you read. I don't think that's probably unique to our world here. Would it be possible for you to read us a couple of maybe a Star Wars story or two?
Yes, we have many books where I'm from. Most of them are legendary format, but I do have a couple of stories that I was going to share with you guys today. If you can see, would it be helpful if I were to go closer so that you can see the illustrations, or
the way we do it on our planet, and it's worked out pretty well for us, is that we kind of read, and then an illustration before we turn the page, we put it up to the camera so the kids can see the illustrations.
That works. I can do that. So how much time do we have then? Would you like to read stories for?
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you read one, and we'll ask a couple of questions, and we'll read another. Time permitting. We'll see how far that takes us down the road.
All right. Very well. Let's begin.
Thank you, Julabal. The time is yours.
All right. I was just disabling something there. So I have Star Wars: The Phantom Menace Race to the Finish Line. A long time ago, on a small planet called Tatooine, a young boy named Anakin Skywalker looked up at the planet's moons. Although he had never left his home, Anakin had always dreamed of going on great adventures and racing across the stars. One day, it looked like Anakin's dreams were coming true. He had met a Jedi Knight named Qui-Gon, who needed supplies to repair his ship. Anakin didn't have money to help the Jedi, So he entered a pod race, hoping to win the supplies. Although Anakin had never won a race before, he knew that he could do it. As the timer counted down to the beginning of the race, Anakin looked at all the other racers. He wasn't worried about any of them except Sebulba. Anakin knew that Sebulba cheated to win, but he wouldn't get away with it this time. Suddenly, the starting gong rang. They were off. But something was wrong. Anakin's pod racer wouldn't move. Anakin began to panic. Sebulba must have done something to his pod racer. But Anakin thought about what Qui-Gon Jinn had taught him right before the race began. He said to concentrate on the moment, feel, don't think, and use your instincts. Anakin took a deep breath, flipped a few switches, and restarted his engines. They roared to life, and Anakin quickly flew away, but he was a long way behind Sebulba. Meanwhile, Sebulba had knocked his ship against another racer's. The pod racer crashed off the course and burst into flames. Sebulba laughed, one fewer racer to worry about. Behind the crash, Anakin flew through a cavern and into a deep cave. One of the other racers wasn't paying attention and ran right into some rocks. The ship exploded. Anakin quickly flew around the fire. That was close, Anakin thought. Anakin raced through the stadium. He had 2 more laps to finish, but he smiled. He was catching up to Sebulba. The racers thundered across the planet. Sebulba was still ahead of everyone else, but he wanted to make sure it stayed that way. Sebulba threw a piece of metal behind him, and it went right into another racer's engine. The engine exploded, and pieces of the pod racer flew everywhere. Sebulba. A piece cut through the cable connecting Anakin's cockpit to one of his engines. Anakin began to spin out of control, but he remembered Qui-Gon's words. Anakin couldn't just worry about his problem if he wanted to win the race. He needed to fix it. Anakin quickly brought his cockpit under control and grabbed the loose cable. Soon, he had reattached the engine and was back in the race. Sebulba and Anakin zoomed through the stadium one last time before the final lap. With all the other racers far behind, Anakin realized that Sebulba was the only one between him and the finish line. Sebulba's species is a dud, by the way, for anyone who's interested. Sebulba's pod racer was much bigger than Anakin's. He forced Anakin right off the course and high up onto a cliff. But Anakin wasn't going to be beaten. He changed gears and crashed right back onto the course in front of Sebulba. For the first time, Anakin was in the lead. Suddenly, Anakin saw smoke coming out of his engines. His pod racer was on fire. The hard landing must have damaged it. As Sebulba raced ahead of him, Anakin knew he didn't have a lot of time. He needed to fix his pod racer right away. Anakin closed a flap above the engine to put out the fire. Then he quickly pumped coolant into the overheated engine. Soon the engine roared back to full power. Anakin grinned. It was time to win the race. Anakin could see the stadium getting closer and closer as he pulled up right next to Sebulba. Sebulba tried to push Anakin's smaller ship off the course again, but Anakin had a plan this time. As Sebulba rammed him, Anakin caught a piece of his pod racer on Sebulba's. Sebulba was stuck. Then, as Sebulba tried to pull his ship away, Anakin unhooked their crafts. Sebulba zoomed wildly off course and smashed part of his pod racer into a rock. Anakin had used Sebulba's own attack against him. Anakin raised his hands over his head as he crossed the finish line. The crowd cheered. Qui-Gon ran to Anakin's pod racer and lifted him high up onto his shoulders. Anakin had done what had seemed impossible. He had won the race. Anakin smiled. One of his dreams had come true. He couldn't help but wonder what great adventure he would have next. That is.
So much for sharing. I know I'm not the only one that has questions for a Jedi Knight. I know our kids are so excited. We have so many that zoomed in today. It's not often that you get to ask a real live Jedi Knight a question. So if you have a question for Jula Ball, may the Force be with you. Raise your hand, and who knows, maybe you can ask a question today. All right, Dan, go ahead and unmute yourself, buddy, and then you can ask your question. I think Dan lost his Wi-Fi signal. Okay, we'll ask somebody else. If someone else has a question for Julie Ball. Let's see. Brandon 1329, you're up, buddy.
What is your galaxy called?
So the galaxy that I live in is called the Republic, or at least that's the controlling body that rules the galaxy.
Good question. Parker, do you have a question? Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go, Parker. Go ahead, ask your question.
He said, your question. Oh, me and my sister watched the Star Wars movies.
Very nice. I've heard you have documentaries on your planet about my universe.
Which one was your favorite, Parker?
All of them.
Nice. Good question, buddy. Anybody else have a question? Oh, family, go ahead. You're up.
My question is, were you one of the people who beated the First Order?
So in the timeline where I'm from, the First Order hasn't come around yet. I was present during the Clone Wars, the attack on Geonosis, and a couple other eras. It's a good question, though. So through the Force, I know of future events, but I have not participated in them as of yet.
Okay, O'Leary family, go ahead and mute yourself.
Not from 107th and McDowell, it's not.
Why did you choose the purple lightsaber?
Way from here to there, because we're technically on 90.
Not so much that I chose the purple lightsaber. The Force connected me with a violet crystal on the planet of Home. Every Jedi that goes through that experience will experience it differently. So there's people that have yellow kyber crystals. They'll have white, green, blue, orange, teal. There's so many different options that the Force can provide.
Good question, boys and girls. Anyone else have a question? Raise your hand. Ruby, go ahead, Ruby.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have the Force?
I do wield the Force.
Okay. Any other questions? Savannah. Savannah, you have to unmute yourself first. Go ahead and click on the little orange microphone. There you go. You're good. Savannah, you're muted again. You have to click on the orange microphone. There you go. Now you can ask your question.
Do you eat things that we would eat here?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Do you eat things that we would eat here?
Do you eat things that we would eat here on this planet?
So yes, all basic life forms require sustenance. We have milk, we have water, we have meat and vegetables. Uh, they wouldn't exactly correlate to anything that you have on your planet. Uh, Milk from us comes from banthas. We have other species of creatures that we can milk for nutrients. However, when I go on missions, I have little capsules that contain pods of energy that can supply me with food and sustenance, and they're about that big. They're super tiny, but they work really well.
Very good question. Well, Jula Ball, how about maybe one more story and then maybe a few more questions?
All right. So, Mr. Oliver, do you have a particular favorite timeline that the Force might guide you to?
Oh gosh, so many. Let me ask you, do you have a favorite timeline, Jula Ball? What is your favorite timeline?
Oh, I love looking into the future. It provides a great insight.
Yes, me too. Go ahead and pick one from any futuristic timeline.
All right. So this one is called Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. The Ewoks join the fight. Han Solo was on a special mission on the forest moon of Endor. He had landed there with Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO. The rebels were looking for a secret bunker that hid a special machine, a machine that could help them destroy the Death Star. As the rebels snuck through the forest, they spotted two biker scouts. The scouts patrolled the forest and guarded the bunker. Chewie and I will take care of this, Han said, pointing to the scouts. You stay here. But as Han and Chewie attacked, more scouts appeared. The scouts jumped on their speeder bikes and zoomed off to warn the Empire. Luke and Leia climbed aboard two other bikes. Keep on that one. I'll take these two, Luke called, and sped away after the scouts. Leia chased after the other scout. She managed to catch up to him, but then the scout fired his blaster at her. Leia tried to dodge the blast and rolled off her speeder. She was all alone in the forest with no way to get back to her friends. Suddenly, a small furry creature appeared. It was an Ewok. He poked at Leia with a sharp stick. Cut it out, Leia said, standing up and brushing herself off. Leia sighed and looked down at the Ewok again. Maybe you can help me, she said. But the Ewok seemed afraid of her. I won't hurt you, Leia said. Here, do you want something to eat? The Ewok was just getting comfortable with Leia when a biker scout appeared behind her. The Ewok quickly hid behind a log. Freeze, the scout said. Using a large stick, the hidden Ewok hit the trooper. Together, Leia and the Ewok disarmed the scout. Come on, let's get out of here, Leia said. The Ewok took Leia's hand and led her toward his village. Meanwhile, Luke and his friends searched for the forest for Leia, but all they found was a wrecked speeder and Princess Leia's helmet. While they were looking for Leia, a group of Ewoks found them. The Ewoks did not seem happy about the strangers in the woods. The Ewoks tied up the rebels and took them to their village. When they arrived, the rebels were surprised to see Princess Leia. Leia tried to tell the Ewoks that Han, Luke, and Chewie were her friends, but they did not listen. Only C-3PO was allowed to remain free. 3PO, Luke said, Tell them if you don't do as you wish, you'll become angry and use your magic. C-3PO did as Luke said, but the Ewoks still wouldn't listen. Closing his eyes, Luke used the Force to make C-3PO float. The Ewoks were amazed. Now they knew the droid was powerful. They quickly did as he said and untied his friends. That night, the Ewoks gathered around C-3PO, who told them tales of the rebels and Darth Vader. The Ewoks liked the stories, and they liked the rebels. They decided to make the rebels part of their tribe. One of the Ewoks jumped up and began to hug Han. As he did so, he jabbered away, but Han couldn't understand what he was saying. He says the Ewoks are going to show us the quickest way to the shield generator, C-3PO translated.
It's not real.
The next morning, when the rebels and the Ewoks set out for the hidden bunker, Luke did not go along. He knew it was time to face Darth Vader. Leia said goodbye to him and wished him luck. Soon, the rebels and the Ewoks arrived at the bunker. The main entrance is on the far side of that landing platform, Princess Leia explained, but the landing platform was surrounded by guards. Surprised the Empire scouts, quickly disarming them. Han, Chewie, and Leia made their way deep inside the bunker.
This is real.
Before they could turn off the Death Star's shield generator, they were surrounded by Imperial soldiers. It was a trap. The Empire had been waiting for them.
Said this is a real.
Your mic.
From their hiding places in the forest, the Ewoks watched as Imperial stormtroopers and scouts marched Han, Leia, and Chewie back out of the bunker. The Ewoks knew they had to help their friends. Along with C-3PO, the Ewoks distracted the soldiers, drawing them away from Leia, Han, and Chewie. The Ewoks knew just what to do. They threw rocks at the stormtroopers. They destroyed the Empire's machines. They tripped the scouts and tied them up. With the Empire's soldiers taken care of, Han Solo did what he had set out to do. He blew up the bunker. The Death Star was no longer protected. Thanks to the Ewoks, the rebels could destroy the Death Star and defeat the Empire once and for all.
Thank you, Jula Ball. Those are such fantastic stories, and I love the timeline that you chose there. Thank you so much. Would it be okay if we kept you for a couple more questions from the boys and girls on our planet?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Allie Lindley. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Allie.
What is your favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, my favorite Star Wars character. So in my galaxy, there's a man by the name of Luke Skywalker. He's a courageous Jedi Knight who stood up against all odds and proved how courage and friendship could win the day.
Boys and girls, if your favorite Star Wars character is Luke Skywalker, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll bet there's many others that have him as their favorite. I thought so. Okay, does anybody else have a question for Jula Ball, Jedi Knight Jula Ball? Let's see. Hiram, go ahead, buddy. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
My question was, who is your favorite clone?
Ooh.
Clone, that's a great question. So I've worked alongside Commander Cody, Captain Rex, Fives, C2-149. I would have to say, even though he passed away early on in the Clone Wars, Fives was an honorable clone, and I believe he was my favorite.
Great question. Kristen Stable 2010. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Do you know Luke Skywalker?
So Luke Skywalker in my timeline hasn't been born yet. I only know of him through my connection to the Force.
That was also a question that I was wondering about too. Thank you, Justin. Luke Mancini. I have a question, Luke. Were you named after Luke Skywalker? No? Okay, just curious. All right, go ahead and ask your question.
So are you a part of like I mean so how do the teams basically get their name? Like the rebels. I mean rebels that's like for like people who like cause graffiti and tear down walls, but except they got that name. So how do teams get their names?
So I understand what you're talking about. So the Empire, also known as the Imperials, are the ruling body of the galaxy during that particular time frame. And the rebels are literally what you just said. In the eyes of the Empire, they are a terrorist organization. They are trying to change the way the galaxy is, but they're trying to change it for the better. So in truth, the fact that they are called rebels is exactly why they're calling themselves the rebellion. They call themselves the Rebel Alliance.
Great question, Luke Mancini. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Jake Perez, you're up, buddy. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can I see your lightsaber again? I didn't the first time you showed it.
Yes, one moment. Are you able to see it now?
Yeah.
So cool. So cool. We have with us Mrs. Kitchell, Carrie Kitchell, and Mr. Finman. Would you like to ask Jula Ball a question?
Yes. We so Finn and myself and the child here, we're wondering if you have any Padawan that you are currently training.
So I actually don't currently have a Padawan. I lost my master at the start of the Clone Wars, and the younglings that are currently in service are not ready to become Padawans. I was actually thrust into knighthood because of the loss of my master.
Good question, Mrs. Kitchell. Liz Evans, were you raising your hand? Did you have a question? Oh, okay. All right, we have time for one more question. Let's see. Boy, you guys know your Star Wars so well, and I'm seeing all these different little Star Wars creatures on the screen. This has been a fun day. Maryland family, do you guys have a question?
My question is, do you have a ship?
I do have a ship. I have what's called a Jedi Starfighter. It's an ETA Actus 1. It belonged to my former master. When he died on the Battle of Geonosis, his ship was left behind. So I flew it home and made it my personal starship.
Wow. I hope one day to be able to fly on a ship like that. Boys and girls, I don't know about you, but I am so grateful that Jula Ball was able to take time in his universe to connect with us in ours. And Jula Ball, if ever you happen to be in our world and you're anywhere in a place called Arizona, in a town called Mesa, anywhere near the cross streets of Ellsworth and McKellips, there's a little place called Zaharas where we're raising an entire neighborhood of Jedi Knights that would love to meet you. So if ever you're in the area, please stop by. You're now officially part of the Zaharas family. Jula Ball, thank you so much. Any final words for our community, Jula Ball, Jedi Knight Jula Ball?
Yes. May the Force be with you all.
And likewise with you, Julabal. Everybody wave goodbye. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mrs. Tickroll, for setting this up for us. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.